The rain hammered against the cracked window of the abandoned warehouse as Dr. Michael Chen pulled his jacket tighter against the biting cold. He had taken a wrong turn in an unfamiliar neighborhood, searching for the community clinic where he volunteered on Tuesday nights. The GPS on his phone had died an hour ago, leaving him stranded in a part of the city he'd never seen before, where streetlights flickered weakly and shadows seemed to breathe with their own life. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the drumming rain. A whimper, barely human, coming from somewhere in the darkness ahead. Every instinct told him to keep walking, to find his way back to familiar streets, but his medical training overrode his caution. Someone needed help. Following the sound through puddles and debris, Michael found himself at the entrance of what appeared to be a derelict building. The door hung askew on rusted hinges, and inside, the darkness was absolute. He fumbled for his phone, using the dying battery's last moments to activate the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing overturned crates, scattered papers, and then, her. She was huddled in the corner, a young Chinese woman who couldn't have been more than 25, her clothes soaked through and her face pale as moonlight. But what made Michael's breath catch was the bundle she clutched to her chest. No, 2 bundles. Twin infants, wrapped in what looked like her own jacket, their tiny faces peaceful despite the chaos around them. The woman's eyes met his, and in them, he saw a depth of desperation he'd encountered only in the most critical cases during his residency. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. Michael immediately dropped to his knees beside her, his doctor's assessment taking over. She was severely hypothermic, her lips tinged blue, her breathing shallow. "I'm a doctor," he said softly, though he wasn't sure she understood English. "I'm going to help you." Her hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping his wrist. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper, heavily accented but clear enough. "Mei Lin, I'm going to carry you and the babies. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you need to hold on." He positioned himself, lifting the tiny infants carefully and arranging them in a makeshift sling he created from his jacket. Then, with a strength born of pure determination, he helped Mei Lin to her feet and supported her weight against his shoulder. The journey was a blur of rain, stumbling steps, and whispered encouragements. Mei Lin drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling in Mandarin, words that sounded like prayers or perhaps lullabies. The twins remained miraculously quiet, as if they sensed the gravity of their situation. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Michael saw lights, real, warm, steady lights coming from renovated buildings. He practically carried all 3 of them to the first door. He reached and pounded on it with his fist, shouting for help. An elderly couple answered, their shocked expressions quickly turning to concern. Within minutes, Michael found himself inside their warm apartment, laying Mei Lin on their couch while the husband called 911. The wife brought blankets and warm water, moving with practiced efficiency that suggested some medical knowledge. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, and Michael rode with them to the hospital, refusing to leave until he knew they were stable. In the emergency room, he watched as his colleagues worked to save Mei Lin's life, administering warmed 4 fluids, treating her for severe hypothermia and dehydration, running tests to check for other complications. The twins were examined in the pediatric unit. Apart from being slightly underweight and showing signs of mild neglect, they were remarkably healthy, a testament to their mother's desperate efforts to care for them despite her own suffering. It was 3 in the morning when a colleague finally pulled Michael aside. "She's going to make it," Dr. Sarah Kim told him, exhaustion evident in her voice. "It was close, but you got her here in time. Another hour and we would have lost her." Michael felt his knees weaken with relief. He sank into a chair in the waiting room, the adrenaline that had sustained him finally draining away. But even as exhaustion crashed over him, his mind couldn't rest. Who was Mei Lin? How had she ended up in that warehouse with 2 infants? And what had driven her to such desperation that she'd been willing to give her children away to a stranger? Over the next few days, as Mei Lin recovered, pieces of her story emerged. She had come to America 2 years ago on a work visa, full of hope and dreams. She'd met someone, fallen in love, gotten pregnant. But when he discovered she was carrying twins, he'd disappeared, leaving her alone and undocumented after her visa expired. Too ashamed to contact her family in China, too afraid of deportation to seek official help, She'd tried to survive on her own. She'd given birth to Li Wei and Li Hua in that same warehouse, with only YouTube videos to guide her. For 5 months, she'd scavenged for food, washed in public restrooms, and poured every ounce of her strength into keeping her babies alive. But the night Michael found her, she'd finally reached her limit. "I thought I'd die," Mei Lin told him in halting English, tears streaming down her face. "I thought better give my babies to kind stranger than let them die with me. But you save all of us." Michael was moved beyond words. He'd always believed in the sanctity of life, in the duty to help those who couldn't help themselves. But this was different. This wasn't just about medical intervention. This was about human connection, about refusing to accept the cruel randomness of fate. "What will you do now?" he asked gently.
Mei Lin's face crumpled.
"I don't know. I have nothing. No papers, no family here, no job. Maybe they take my babies anyway." That night, Michael made a decision that would change all their lives. He contacted an immigration lawyer he knew from medical school, explained the situation, and together they began building a case for Mei Lin. He also reached out to a Chinese community organization that helped immigrants navigate the complexities of life in America. But Michael didn't stop there. He found Mei Lin a place to stay, a small apartment owned by a friend who agreed to rent it at a minimal cost. He helped her apply for emergency assistance and connected her with social services that could provide support while her legal situation was resolved. He even organized a fundraiser among his colleagues at the hospital, raising enough money to cover her immediate needs and legal fees. As weeks turned into months, Michael watched as Mei Lin transformed. With proper nutrition, health care, and support, she blossomed. She began learning English more seriously, found work at a Chinese restaurant that didn't ask too many questions, and devoted herself to creating a stable life for Li Wei and Li Hua. The twins thrived under their mother's renewed care. Michael visited regularly, watching them grow from fragile infants into robust, giggling babies. He brought toys, formula, and often just his presence, a reminder that they weren't alone in this world. One evening, nearly a year after that fateful night, Michael received a call from the immigration lawyer. Mei Lin's case had been successful. She'd been granted humanitarian parole and was on a path toward permanent residency. The relief and joy in Mei Lin's voice when she called to thank him brought tears to his eyes. "You give me back my life," she said, her English much improved. "You give my children future. How I ever thank you enough." Michael thought about that question. He thought about the oath he'd taken as a doctor, about the random chance that had led him down that dark street, about the courage of a mother willing to entrust her most precious gifts to a stranger rather than watch them perish. "You already have," he replied softly. "You fought to survive. You never gave up on your children. You taught me what real strength looks like." Years later, Michael would look back on that rainy night as a turning point in his own life. It had reminded him why he'd become a doctor in the first place. Not just to treat symptoms or prescribe medications, but to see the humanity in every person who crossed his path, to recognize that healing wasn't just physical but emotional and spiritual too. He attended Li Wei and Li Hua's first birthday party, then their second, their third. He watched them take their first steps, speak their first words in both English and Mandarin. He saw Mei Lin build a life filled with purpose and hope, eventually starting her own small catering business. And sometimes, late at night, he would remember that moment in the warehouse. The desperate whisper, the trust in a stranger's eyes, the weight of 2 tiny lives in his arms. He'd remember thinking that some encounters were pure chance, random intersections of need and ability. But he'd come to believe differently now. Some rescues changed everything, not just for those who were saved, but for those who did the saving. Because in the end, they'd all rescued each other. From despair, from loneliness, from the terrible belief that the world was too cold and cruel to care. They'd created something beautiful from that dark night. A family, not of blood but of choice, bound together by compassion, courage, and the simple human truth that we're all responsible for one another.